You see a banquet of allies. You see the warm glow of noble intentions and the comfortable smiles of the virtuous. But I see the effectual truth. I see the world as it truly is, not as the dreamers and the pious wish it to be. In the arenas where states are born and broken, goodness is not a shield, it is a fatal defect. They will tell you that power is the harvest of your moral rectitude. They lie. Power is a neutral tool, a cold responsibility that demands total mastery of perception and the relentless application of strategy. Hear my prophecy and let it strip away the skin of your illusions. A man who wants to act virtuously in every way necessarily comes to grief among so many who are not virtuous. To rule is not to be a saint in a cathedral. It is to be a commander on a battlefield where the good are merely the first to be crushed. If you desire to maintain your state, you must finally learn how not to be good and when to use that knowledge as the sharpest edge of your survival.
Part 1. The Nature of Power and Necessary Cruelty. Let us speak of mercy, that word so often mouthed by those who have never tasted the bitterness of a state in collapse. You fear the label of cruelty, yet I tell you that a ruler who uses exemplary severity to keep his subjects loyal and united is far more compassionate than the leader whose excessive pity allows for disorder, muggings, and murder. The latter harms the entire community to save his own conscience, while the former sacrifices a few to preserve the many. In the clinical reality of power, a quick, sharp strike is a kindness that the do-gooders are too cowardly to perform. Observe the logic of the boardroom and the battlefield. Hesitation in the face of necessity is the mother of ruin. When a corporation merges, the kind leader who stutters through months of uncertainty breeds a rot that destroys the whole firm. The wise executive, however, calculates the cost, strikes once, and moves on. For order is the only soil in which prosperity can grow. A state is not a social club. It is a structure held together by the gravity of consequences. Consider my model of efficacy, Caesar Borgia. When he took Romagna, it was a den of thieves and feuding lords. He did not send them flowers. He sent Ramiro Dorco, a man as efficient as he was cruel, to scour the land with blood and iron. Order was restored, yet Borgia knew the people's resentment would eventually turn toward the source. To purge their souls and prove his own nobility, he had his own minister, the very man who carried out his orders, cut in two and placed in the public square of Cesena. The people were at once satisfied and stupefied. He used cruelty to end cruelty, then sacrificed the tool to win the heart. Take this as your first law of survival. People only avenge minor insults, but of major ones they cannot. Therefore, if you must injure a man, do it so severely that you no longer need to fear his revenge. To wound an enemy and leave him breathing is to hire an assassin for your own future. If the state's preservation requires a blow, let it be terminal. Half measures are the luxury of the doomed, and in the game of power, there is no prize for being mostly in control.
Part 2. Virtù and Fortuna. We must now turn our gaze to the twin masters of the human theater, Virtù and Fortuna. To the uninitiated, life is a series of accidents. To the prince, it is a grand architecture where the relentless will of the great man clashes with the whims of chance. You must understand that fortune is like one of those violent, raging rivers that, when enraged, flood the plains, and wash soil from one place to deposit it in another. Everyone flees before them, and no one can repel their fury. But observe the man of virtue. When the waters were flowing quietly, he did not waste his hours in idle prayer. He constructed dikes and embankments, so that when the river rose again, it would be confined to a channel, or its impetus rendered less wild and dangerous. He knows that while luck may govern half of our deeds, he is the undisputed master of the remaining half. Virtue is not the meekness of the saints. It is the calculated capacity to shape the world and maximize every advantageous moment fortune provides. Real power does not lie in the blunt, exhausted blow of brute force, but in the subtle and sophisticated mastery of the times. A great leader is he who possesses a flexible disposition, capable of varying his conduct from good to evil and back again, as the winds of fortune dictate. He must be a broad questioner, always observing the board, ready to abandon a failed strategy and pivot with the surgical precision of an artist. Flexibility is not a lack of principle, it is the ultimate discipline of the mind against the volatility of existence. And now, I give you the most enduring prophecy of the power game. Quote, "Fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if one wants to hold her down, to beat her and strike her down." Unquote. She yields not to the cautious who proceed coldly, but to the young, the bold, and the impetuous, who dare to seize her with a spirited will. In the clinical reality of the state, fortune favors the brave, those who do not wait for luck to find them, but who hunt it down and leash it to their own design.
Part 3. To be loved or feared. We come now to the great paradox that keeps the weak awake at night. Is it better to be loved or feared? My answer remains as unyielding as the stone of the Palazzo Vecchio. One would like to be both, but since they are rarely found in the same skin, it is far safer to be feared than loved. Love is a fragile thread of obligation, woven from the fickle gratitude of men who are, by their very nature, ungrateful, deceptive, and eager for gain. This bond of love is broken whenever a man sees a path to personal profit, but fear is a chain forged in the dread of punishment, a chain that never fails and never leaves your hand. Look to your digital empires, the giants who rule your perception under the mask of connecting the world. They understand the effective truth. It is not the user's love that grants them power, but the user's total dependency and the silent, pervasive fear of being cast into the darkness of exclusion. They manage appearances with the skill of a fox, projecting a benevolent image while building an infrastructure of control that ensures obedience. A ruler does not need your affection to maintain his state. He only needs the certainty that you lack the will to resist the consequences of your own disobedience. But heed this warning, for even a lion can be brought down if he is foolish enough to be hated. A prince must make himself feared, yet he must avoid hatred at all costs, for hatred is the mother of all conspiracies. The path to avoiding this ruin is simple. Do not touch the property or the women of your subjects. I have watched the nature of man through the centuries, and I tell you this: a man forgets the death of his father more quickly than the loss of his inheritance. Respect a man's pride and his purse, and he will remain a docile subject of your fear. Steal his wealth, and you have created a ghost that will haunt your throne until it falls.
Conclusion: the legacy of the fox and the lion. We conclude where the art of the state truly begins, with the mastery of the beast. To hold your state in a world of wolves, you must be more than human. You must imitate the lion and the fox, for the lion is defenseless against snares, and the fox is helpless against wolves. One must be a fox to recognize the traps laid by the deceptive, and a lion to terrify those who would use brute force against you. Those who act simply as lions are foolish, and those who act only as foxes will eventually be crushed by the weight of their own fragility. Understand this final clinical reality. In the high theater of politics, perception is your greatest currency. The appearance of virtue, of being merciful, faithful, and religious, is far more useful to a prince than the actual possession of such traits. The masses are simple, driven by immediate needs, and will always allow themselves to be deceived by a great pretender who manages his reputation with surgical care. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few truly know what you are. In the calculation of power, a well-placed lie or a strategic management of impressions often carries more weight than 1,000 hollow truths. This little volume remains the Bible of power because it refuses to offer you the comfort of a lie. It forces you to confront the reason of state, the brutal truth that the survival and security of the collective may require actions that are individually condemned. It describes the world not as a cathedral of ideals, but as a workshop of results, where the only true sin is to fail. Power is not a reward for your morality. It is a neutral tool, a relentless responsibility that belongs to those who possess the virtù to seize it and the cold intelligence to maintain it. The game of power is inescapable. To deny it is to be its first victim. The hangaway of your illusions is a comfortable place to die. But I invite you to step out of the cave and face the sun of the effectual truth. In this endless game where the board is always shifting and the stakes are life itself, the final question remains for you alone to answer. Do you want to be an artist of reality or a denier of your own fate?